Thanks, Emily, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to NCEDA's Professional Development Seminar, Data Trends and Tools, Finding Your Path to Workforce Innovation. I'm Josh Hollingsy. I'm with the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce. I'm also co-chair of NCEDA's Professional Development Committee. It's my duty to kick things off today. And with that, workforce issues continue to complicate North Carolina's recovery from the economic crisis wrought by the pandemic. Many of our counties have now unemployment rates lower than what they were before COVID-19. Companies report difficulty filling open positions, and national surveys of location advisors continue to rank labor and talent at the top of their list of must-have factors in the site selection process. Rising above workforce challenges begins with a thorough understanding of labor markets. Like most obstacles economic developers face, winning solutions require knowledge, creativity, and collaboration. We're joined today by 4 experts who will share their insights and experience about how labor market data can enhance economic development strategies, attract new employers, support existing industry, and create talent pipelines that keep rising generations of young residents in our communities. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our guests and let them begin. First, let's take a moment to acknowledge NCEDA's annual sponsors. Emily will scroll through these important names now. These companies and organizations support every component of NCEDA's expansive mission and growing body of programs. We thank all of these sponsors for their generous support. Now for our moderator and our guest speakers. I'll begin with Dr. Jenni Harris. Dr. Jenni Harris is a familiar name and face to most NCEDA members and will moderate today's discussion. She's a fellow Wilmingtonian and currently serves as Executive Director of Business Services at the North Carolina Department of Commerce's Division of Workforce Solutions, where she routinely works with employers and partners to integrate workforce innovation and economic development. We're so grateful for her helping organize today's webinar and moderating our panel. Ryan McDaniels is Executive Director of Lake Norman Economic Development. Prior to that, he served more than a decade with Cabarrus Economic Development. We have Robert Van Geons, who serves as the President and CEO of the Fayetteville Cumberland County Economic Development Corporation. He worked for nearly 2 decades in the economic development trenches in the Charlotte region, southeastern North Carolina, and Connecticut. Finally, we have Jamie Vaughn. He's Senior Analyst for Market Intelligence with the North Carolina Department of Commerce's Labor and Economic Analysis Division, known in shorthand as LEAD. His work at LEAD includes development of nccareers.org, a web-based career portal that he's going to tell us more about today. Jamie also has worked at the local level with Chatham County Economic Development Corporation and the Durham Workforce Development Board. My thanks go out to all the panelists and our moderator, and we appreciate your participation. And now I'll turn over the Zoom room to Dr. Jenni Harris. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. That was a great introduction. I'll add that Jamie can probably talk a little bit about this more later, but in a recent survey of employers recently regarding workforce, the #1 top challenge employers face right now is finding workers. In addition, those same employers said that what they need most from workforce development professionals is help finding workers. No surprises there, right? So there's lots of room for innovation here, and you've got a great panel here of people that can talk about that. We've seen where some cities, counties, and economic development organizations have responded to this challenge around workforce in some unique ways. One strategy is to get their hands on labor and employment information and share that with the companies that you're working with. Robert Van Geons saw this actually as an opportunity for Cumberland County a few years ago and did something about it. So Robert, can you share a little bit about some of the problems that you faced and how you brought that approach to this labor data idea and what you've done with that since?
Sure, and for those who know me, what I'm about to say, what I'm looking forward to sharing are some non-traditional routes around this topic. Non-traditional is probably something I'm well known for, but for us, we ran into a problem both during my time in Salisbury and a bit here in Fayetteville and Cumberland County we're a small MSA where we are, so that messes up some of our drive time demographics don't overlay. When I was in Salisbury, we sat on the edge of two very large MSAs. And so finding data that was both current and also flexible in terms of the geography that was applicable to my actual labor shed, it set us out on some an interesting path there. Full disclaimer, what I'm about to share, there's probably other ways to do it, better ways to do it, cheaper ways to do it, but these are the ways that that worked for us. And if it could, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And just, I do have a couple of quick slides here. And so as I, hopefully somebody stop me if you can't see my screen here. Are we good?
Yeah, I can see it.
So on this first one especially, this is not a paid promotion. And if it was, I'd be getting a commission or ask for one, because this wasn't cheap. So this is a example that we've used in a couple of projects. We have great data at the state level. We have great data from the feds when it comes down to customized employer versus employer, or really having access down to, if you know your competition, wherever they might be, or better yet, know where a company might be operating, how do you get good hard comparisons? So we've worked with a company called PayScale. And what we really liked about them is their product is updated monthly. It is directly populated with data from companies, from employees, in addition to traditional sources. And so what you're able to do is go in and really pull positions down to their skill sets. Here's one we did for a director of business development. But the neat thing is you have the flexibility to get into other markets and then really show how, and this is when cost was as much as a factor of availability, which is a little bit different than where we are today. You can see here how we're able to stack up against our competition, known or otherwise, to show what might be out there. And we were able to take this down. This was an e-commerce project. These wages, you could tell by what they are a little bit older, a couple of years ago, because things have changed. But you can see we're able to get in there, and really in this list are 4 of the company's locations. You know, we pretended like we didn't know who they were, and so data in always helps your data out. But we're able to really hit this and show that we are the most cost-effective marketplace out there for the positions they needed. This product actually gets down to, as well, into the benefits being offered by comparable employers within this. And I think a neat thing here you'll see, or interesting thing I should say to those data dorks out there, you see 23% of the employees responded none in terms of their medical health care. This is an operator, in this case, here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. These are the comparisons, where we have a high number of people with military benefits through the VA or through their spouse. And so we have a higher than average percentage. I think I only have, at times I have 1 or 2 people on our health insurance here in our organization. So just some neat things there with on how we were able to put ourselves out there competitively. And again, you get a validity score on there. And so this is a different source and a different way to look at some of these things. But I think one of the other questions, Jenny, I think that we had discussed in the pre-call was what we were seeing from site selectors and what they were asking for. On this particular project, we were eventually able to get our hands on, they were kind enough to share their assessment of our community. And we found out that they sure did know a lot more about us and were a lot better at it than we had given some of them credit. I'm sure this is not the same for all site selection firms, but you see they got into us in the labor shed, in the driving distances, how many people had multiple jobs. And I think then for the challenge for all of us is how do you supplement their data, which is often the same as yours, with something that can compete and win. We've got some great tools. I think it's worth mentioning if you haven't looked at Zoom Prospector through the state of your region, it's got some great community by community comparison features that are free. But for us, it was about shaking up their narrative. How do we tell a story that contradicts some of their data sources? So getting into, this is our outbound traffic for commuting patterns from on the map, a census site, getting into that, looking at how many folks we have leaving our community every day that could be captured, and then going into it and getting into where we have, if we don't have available people looking for work, what do we have to upskill? And this is a recent pull for Cumberland County. So in a world of $15 an hour average starting wages for many things, you can see we've got quick math there says, well, it's what he says, 30,000 people that would be a very attractive wage to, or more than that actually. So even down getting into what our part-time wages were here and how we could work that in. Beyond the comparative data, we're a big fan of surveying. If they're saying we don't have enough folks as our competition or a metro or falling behind, we went out here on this project, we had 7,800 responses and actually had people sign up, say, I'd be willing to work for this mystery company at that pay scale, getting into the shifts they were willing to do, everything we could to say, look, whatever the data tells you, we have the ability to deliver on our commitment to you at the price point you're willing to pay for the skill sets that you have requested. And so those are some fun things we did, even getting into Spanish language speakers and whether or not they had experience with certain industries or systems, just ultimately knowing what the client was looking for in their traditional employee profile and demonstrating we'd be able to draw it, if not from our community, the surrounding area. Just the last thing, because I did throw, and I'll stop the share here. I just also wanted to share some of the fun stuff we're doing that are out there now for new tools. Is anybody, I'm sure some people are playing with real-time cell data and people traveling. This is about, available at a month level. You can actually get into now when we're talking about how do I fill that need for the employers. Will they be able to recruit the people they need? These are examples here where we can pull who was where, when, how they got there, where they're going, and even down to looking at, this is an example of people that have come through our airport. The darker blue dots mean that they've been to our airport 4 times in a year. So you can see the locations that have an interaction. And if you're looking to recruit people to fill highly skilled positions, in addition to what we've got here, these are some good markets to go to. And I think it's just part of building that employers looking at their today, tomorrow, and future recruitment strategy. I'd just say that one thing, as I back up a little bit on some of these data sources, just a cautionary tale, be careful not to mix your metaphors. The old saying of a stitch in time saves the early bird. If you're going to go down this road, just make sure that you're able to have all of your data quantified and correlated back to an original data source that is comparable. The one thing that we sometimes caught ourselves doing was try to take apples from aisle A to apples of aisle B and thinking they were going to taste the same. So with that, I'm happy to stop my share there and just happy to share.
So Robert, that's some really good data. I want to actually talk to you after the fact because I didn't get to see that beforehand when we were planning this, but so I'm interested in some of those things. But one of the things that caught my attention, I love that it compares your region to other regions. And so when site selectors and companies are talking to you, you're able to, like you said, give them that data and sort of enhance what they're coming to you with. What are the data points that you found to be most critical to them that you're able to offer? Yeah,
I think especially in the tight labor market, it's that underemployment. That underemployment is because of available position and not because of capacity. And so it's a fine line between saying we have these folks in these industries, but are they upskillable? Can we, with additional certifications and training, move them up a notch or two? Now, for us in Fayetteville, and other service and retail heavily communities, it's pretty clear that a chunk of those folks who are store managers or hospitality workers can step up. I think it gets a little bit more challenging when you get into some other dynamics to say, could that line worker be a shift supervisor? It's a little harder to tell. And so how can you demonstrate clearly that you've got a upscalable talent pool in your community that can step up to those new jobs?
And then is there anything different in what, kind of before COVID, before the pandemic, is there anything different about what they're looking for, what questions they're asking?
We've seen a big shift to really only in 2 areas. One is the ability to recruit virtual and to have the capacity from an infrastructure standpoint, but also a community and a location and the ability to attract applicants to a small virtual operation. We announced a project just last week, 50 jobs, one office person. We provided them an office here in our accelerator for that, but they're hiring 50 full-time people. How does that individual make the connections needed and draw talent and have a location and pipeline of potential workers? It's a little bit different than when you've got a 100,000 square foot facility with a "we're hiring" sign out on the street. You have to get your citizens to have faith that these employers are real, that these jobs are good, and also that you have the IT infrastructure and the skill sets available to work remotely without supervision.
Thanks for that. There's questions coming in. So Nathan has asked questions. So we'll get to those more towards the end, if that's okay, so we can make sure everybody has a chance to talk. So I mentioned earlier that some cities and counties have made a long-term commitment, like Cumberland County, regarding designating funds to programs like on-the-job training and apprenticeships, programs that employers can take advantage of, and also counties that have created positions and towns that have created positions for workforce specialists or workforce subject matter experts within their own economic development organizations. The town of Lake Norman, as most of us know, is an example of this, and that's why I wanted to have Ryan McDaniels come talk about that. So Ryan, you're up. Can you tell us a little bit about the conversations that the local business owners had with Lake Norman Economic Development that led to the discussion about the creation of this position?
Absolutely, and thanks for the opportunity to interact with this great panel. So we were hearing from our businesses that they were really struggling with three things. One, finding employees, and this was 18, 19, so it was pre-COVID. Companies were still struggling. They were having to use non-traditional means. We've noticed in some of the buses around here that we have our manufacturers advertising on the back of our transit system. We heard from our companies, primarily manufacturers, that their workforce was aging and aging out of the market. So they're having to increase wages, offering various options to try to retain employees. And then the third issue was not so much from the local business owners, it was the rising cost of a four-year college option. So we looked at those three variables. We have a group here, it's Lake Norman Education Collaborative, and we partner with our chamber as well as the mayor of Huntersville, and we were already working on some initiatives. And it really, we were literally in a facility in March of 2020 when all this started, and we had so much momentum with our employers, with our schools, with the counselors, the principals, and the students. So we had to put everything on hold, but we realized, coming out of the pandemic, this would be enough work to create a full-time position. And we've certainly hit the ground running. We brought on a workforce development manager in June of last year, and we have already starting to see great success.
So what's the focus area for that new position, and how have you adjusted to that hybrid model of economic development that includes workforce development?
Absolutely. We're the main goal is to get our students, our unemployed and our underemployed, to local job openings. So it can we reach out to the schools. That was really the first step, the most logical step. We're trying to target from middle school and up when students start to make decisions about which career path they may choose. And we're also trying to work with our folks who may be underemployed. So one of our manufacturers tells us their favorite place to recruit employees is Chick-fil-A. They'll try to poach employees from Chick-fil-A because they're so well trained and they have a lot of aptitude that is really attractive to the manufacturers. The hybrid model has been interesting for us. We still have not been able to get back in our schools physically. So the schools are still pretty prohibitive on visitors. So we've had to shift to a couple of virtual events. One has actually worked better in the virtual format. Instead of only having one high school to participate, we now have three of our regional high schools that are able to participate in the event. So the hybrid model is definitely different, but we've been able to tweak it. We have an in-person event tomorrow, so we're really trying to get back to in-person when possible, but sometimes the flexibility of virtual works to our favor.
Yeah. So do you have, and this is about the position itself, when you created the position and the job description, did you have, or do you have performance expectations or success measures that are associated with that position?
It's an interesting position to measure because, you know, if the manager's speaking to a middle schooler and the middle schooler may have been looking at one career path, and then as part of that discussion or interaction, they shifted plans, you know, we could be 7-8 years before seeing the impact. So it will be a long-term study and analysis, but what we are measuring are activities. So more events we're able to host, more activities, more interactions. That's the measurables on our end. Because it really is a long-term play, and it's something that's going to be important for our community, not just, you know, in years 1 through 3, but all the way out indefinitely.
So then, okay, so then for other people that might be participating in this that are saying, oh, that's a great idea, or they may have already considered hiring such a position, what would you say in hindsight others should think about as they're considering creating similar positions?
Yeah, I'd say you definitely need a self-starter because it's not a defined role. As sort of a BR&E expert, for example, knows you go out and call on existing businesses. If you're on the recruitment side, you know what to do. Project management side, it's pretty self-explanatory. So definitely need a self-starter. Need someone who's very organized because there's a lot of interaction with school systems. That's a completely different language than we speak in the ED world. My wife's in that world, so I sometimes hear it in the house here, but it's a different mindset in education. So you have to be able to work through that. And then most importantly, the ability to collaborate. You have to get the buy-in from the local schools. We're part of CMS here, but we also have charter schools and private schools as well. So outreach to those schools has been interesting because they have been so hyper-focused on the 4-year route. So we're making some good inroads, and that we have an event tomorrow that we're excited about. We have students from 3 local schools that have either self-identified or were identified by their teachers or counselors that they're probably not going the 4-year route. So we're going to tour some of our advanced manufacturers to allow them to see how spotless and clean these facilities are, how cool they are, and how nice, you know, it's an attractive place to work. And then we're following that up with a meeting at the community college to talk about different options there for students who may not want to go to college or may not have that need to go the 4-year route. So definitely it's a unique position. If anyone out here in the state is interested in discussing the job description, I'll be glad to help and providing guidance that we can on our end.
That job description is probably worth gold, so you can sell it. I was going to ask about the community colleges. So I hear the focus on K-12 and sort of creating opportunities for career pathways starting at that age, which is great. And then your connection to the community college. I was going to ask if they've been a part of the conversation yet, or if that's the plan going forward. So it sounds like you're already heading that way. That's great.
They're a great partner for us. We're fortunate to have a very large community college system. So if there's not a module at our regional campus, there's definitely something within Mecklenburg County and the CPCC system. So we try to take advantage of it, not just on the job recruitment side, but on the workforce development initiatives as well.
I'll use this opportunity to plug something. The local workforce board staff has an entire program around youth. And so I've forgotten the name of the employee that you have. I know it's Melanie Underwood's daughter, but I don't remember her name.
Elizabeth, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. If Elizabeth hasn't tapped into them yet, that's a great opportunity. They are always, the workforce board staff are always looking for more youth programs, opportunities to work with youth. And so when there's an opportunity for youth to be a part of an employer and a work experience program of some sort, or a training program. They've got funding for that, and they would love to be involved in that. So I'll just throw that plug out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we met with their executive director probably a month ago, and we also connected with our junior achievement program as well. So the ball is rolling. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I know that there's going to be more questions probably from the audience on that as well. Before that, though, we want to be sure that everyone understands that there is labor data out there and that it's accessible to them. If you haven't already looked at that, if you've not heard of that, we wanted to make sure that Jamie Vaughn with the lead office at Commerce was a part of this conversation too. He's been an economic developer, a workforce developer, and he now analyzes economic data. So if there's anybody that can talk about this, it's Jamie. Can you give everybody an overview of what data is available and where they can find it?
Sure, absolutely. So number one, there is tons of data out there. Again, Robert gave some great examples of what was there out of, and again, those were primarily subscription-based information, but there's a lot of, again, the official stats are going to come from the government entities, U.S. Census, from LEAD, from Bureau of Labor Statistics, Bureau of Economic Analysis, things like that. And there's lots of information that's available directly from LEAD's North Carolina specific. They all have different geographies that are available. One of the places that hopefully everybody's already aware of, d4.ncommerce.com. And by the way, I have created a quick two-page front and back guide to most of these sites. So again, people can certainly jot them down while I'm talking, but I think in a follow-up email, they're going to send out this, and it's also going to be added to the Resource Center and NCEDA. And then LEAD is also finalizing a resource guide for data, which is going to be a little bit more specific. I think it's multiple pages more than just a front and back, that also I would suggest that you kind of keep there for future reference. But the key places where you're going to want to go is d4.ncommerce.com. On there is where you're going to get the official labor statistics for unemployment rate, employment numbers, the unemployed, labor force numbers, things like that. The quarterly census of employment and wages, which is the industry numbers. It's updated quarterly based on businesses, establishments, as it's called, industry weekly wages, jobs numbers coming out of there. CES, which is an updated monthly, which is an estimate of jobs that has been very timely, of course, in times currently. OEWS, which is occupational employment and wage statistics. So those are based on the wages that I talked about earlier. You heard me talk about in QCW are industry wages. So that's the average of the industry. OEWS gives you wages by occupation, by percentile. So you can understand the 10th percentile, the 25th percentile. Some of the data Robert showed earlier from PayScale had some of those percentages in there. And it's important to understand that. Too many people get focused on that average wage, that median wage for there. Well, what wage you're going to get from an employer has a lot of factors. One of them is your own experience. Coming straight out of school, maybe you should be looking closer to the 10 percentile wage. If you've been in the industry for 20 years, maybe you should look something higher than just median. So kind of getting an understanding there. There's also, some demographic reports that we have under D4. Hopefully you guys are aware of the area reports that can be done by county, by COGS, by MSAs, prosperity zones, workforce development boards. Those really combine a lot of different sources, census data, unemployment, the Laos data, the QCW industry data, commuting data, patterns, information that's in there in a great one-page report. And then we kind of alluded to in the introduction that one of the challenges that's out there in terms of workforce is that talent pool coming in, that labor pool, helping them understand jobs, helping them understand what occupations are there. Because again, most of us know the occupations that we know. As a high schooler, I knew what my dad did, knew what my mom did. I knew there were doctors, lawyers, things like that. But there are 793 occupations classified by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and 40,000 job titles kind of under that. And so we created a tool that hopefully everybody's familiar with called nccareers.org. And this combines a lot of labor market information some of which I'll kind of break out in just a second. And it allows users focused middle school through their entire career, K to gray, as our friends in DPI, K through 12 like to talk, through a career exploration. It matches assessments. So individuals can come in and they can take assessments and understand what their interests are, which then matches to occupations. And then on those occupations, you can learn information about growth rates, about wages, about, exactly what do they do, kind of information, all in a one-page piece of information. And then once you decide which occupations you're interested in, then you can identify things like education. Where can I go to get this education? We've matched with the Bureau of Labor Statistics education requirements. So therefore, if it needs an associate's degree, we point you to the North Carolina community colleges that offer degrees to prepare you for that occupation, or vice versa. And there's lots of other information kind of within there that I would encourage anybody to log on to nccareers.org, get into. It's been highly adopted by middle school and high school counselors already. Again, Ryan, I think it was Elizabeth that you were just referring to. Hopefully Ryan's Elizabeth is using that, kind of moving forward, getting into the schools. It's community college, the career centers, as well as the four-year universities, both public and private, are using it in their career centers. And then, of course, NC Works, whether it's through the Next Gen program or in the traditional community or in the career centers, working that. Again, the whole goal is to align individuals' interests and with occupations that match their needs and desires, understanding growth rates, understanding what wages mean, things like that. And then there's a couple other sites that I'm going to mention quickly. There's another site called tools.nccareers.org, which has the individual information. In North Carolina Star Jobs. So we do, our staff at LEAD does employment projections, 10-year long-term projections every 2 years for both occupations as well as industry breakdown. You can find that information at tools.nccareers.org. There's other things like staffing patterns. So if you have questions, again, trying to match, maybe you have a company an RFP that's come out that says we're in this industry. They don't give you any occupations. They don't give you anything like that. Well, you could go one step beyond, use North Carolina staffing patterns and understand at the 3-digit level what occupations are hired within that industry, and provide a little bit of occupational information, kind of wages, things like that, which may give you a little bit of advantage early in the process before you may know a little bit more about the company, things like that. And then finally, we have a site that hopefully you're aware of called analytics.nccommerce.com. These are Tableau visualizations of a lot of really good information. Number one, the NC Today report, the monthly report of North Carolina labor market conditions, again, big picture, is available on analytics.nccommerce.com, as well as the regional labor market overviews, where by workforce development board area, you can get that labor market information. Again, a nice one-pager that you can print out and kind of analyze and play with. And then a couple of the things that Jenny, you referred to at the very beginning, the employer needs survey that was just published from there. And you're going to hear, I think press releases are going out now, but you can actually access the employer needs dashboard visualization of that through analytics. And I'll give you, the link is actually in that paper. It's a little bit longer link, unfortunately, but I'll provide it in the survey that we sent out. And then finally, we're doing a business pulse survey through Commerce right now. We've been doing it for a few months, and so we're starting to get a little bit of data, asking questions, along the lines of what's going on immediately right now. And there's also a dashboard, a visualization of the results coming out of that business pulse survey as well. So again, a lot of stuff I just covered. You'll have the links and everything in there, but hopefully you kind of understand some of the places you can go to and find that kind of information.
Jamie, since you just mentioned the Business Pulse survey, do you want to share what last week's press release said from that survey?
So let's see, do you have it handy?
No, actually, I don't. I don't remember the percentage, but it was just overall the businesses were optimistic about the future.
Yeah, it was absolutely. It was overall showing optimism for the future. Of course, kind of moving forward, and as you said, really kind of the biggest question moving forward was, and Jeff just put it in the chat, so you can kind of pull that up there. Sorry, you caught me off guard. I wasn't prepared to talk about that.
Sorry, I know. Well, you mentioned it, so I think
Exactly.
Exactly.
But yeah, there is optimism moving forward. And
So
I would encourage anybody to get into that survey and kind of get an idea. And again, that's statewide aggregate. You can break it down by some region as well.
So
And again, as Jeff just noted in the chat, that the February data was just updated yesterday.
oh, that's
So
cool.
this is as hot off the presses as it can be. And we update it every month.
So you mentioned a lot of places where everybody can go to get
Yes.
data, and that's helpful. If people are going to look at data and they're not sure exactly what I mean, I do that sometimes too. And so I have my data analyst, Freeman Denton, is the thank goodness for him, because he can go get it and look at it and tell me what it says, which is very, very helpful. We used it a lot at the beginning of COVID, when a lot of the hospitality industry was shutting down. All these people were out of work. The service industry was out of work. And yet Fidelity Investments was making their announcements that they were expanding and hiring 400 and 500 people in Durham and Charlotte, customer service managers.
Yes.
And so that was a huge opportunity to look at some of the labor data and some of the skills that were, for nccareers.org, to look at the skills that service industry had and get them, especially if they were in that Raleigh and Durham and Charlotte area, to get them into those jobs where there was higher pay, regular hours, and sort of a career path within the financial industry. So, NC Careers was hugely beneficial for us, especially at the beginning of COVID and even now. So once they have this labor market information, what are some of the caveats? Because you mentioned that the other day, that there are also caveats that they need to be aware of.
So one of the things that you always need to understand, well, there's a couple of things that you always need to understand. Number one, geography. Understand what geography are you looking at? Are you looking at statewide data? Are you looking at regional data? Are you looking at county data? All of these resources have different geographies in which they in which they're allowed to provide. Part of the reason is that we can't provide county, on some resources. We are bound by Bureau of Labor Statistics, by federal guidelines in terms of what information we can disclose. There's confidentiality in terms of the way this information is collected. And so we can only provide so much information. And part of that is because of confidentiality. Part of it is the data that we have, especially for smaller areas. And Robert talked about this, about why he was going into PayScale and stuff to get this information, is that we are just not able to provide because we don't have enough data to provide quality information out there. For instance, if you look at census data, at the lowest levels they provide, look at that margin of error. Sometimes the margin of error, again, let's just say a population, look at the margin of error on a population estimate or something through census, and maybe there's 1,000 people. The margin of error could be plus or minus 1,000 people. So again, you have to provide that information. So when you're getting the information from a governmental source, again, such as LEAD, you're going to know that is the official number that's there. That's really kind of a key. Now, again, going back to Robert's, the stuff that Robert shared, and that's some amazing information. And I can only imagine, again, from my background is economic development and recruitment, I can only imagine how valuable that is. But again, they are estimates. That information usually starts with the governmental information that we have. Robert showed MZ, for instance. MZ takes our data that we provide, the official numbers, and then they have economists do estimates upon estimates kind of within that to come up with the more recent data that they provide. So again, there's nothing wrong with that. As Robert said, and he's absolutely right, cite the source of where you get it. But also something you need to understand with private data is that private data, you need to make sure that when you're comparing, you're looking at the same update, making those apples to apples provide. For instance, with MZ, they'll say, okay, this is our January 2022 data. You can't use February 2022 data and compare back to January 2022 data because they're kind of estimates. So you need to go back, and the estimate will change. The same number will change kind of moving forward. And that's just a function of they're getting more and more pieces of data to make those estimates. So governmental data does not change once it's published, except for, there will be some revisions, seasonally adjusted information, Jeff just alluded in the chat that, for instance, unemployment rates, the seasonally adjusted information came out. So therefore, the seasonally adjusted numbers are different from the non-seasonally adjusted numbers, things such as that.
So,
hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's a complicated, there's lots and lots and lots of factors going on.
well, that's why you're our resident expert.
Exactly.
And Jeff Develis.
Or I try to be at least.
The whole lead team. So I want to shift a little bit. Everybody knows how to get in touch with you if they have further questions about how to access the data. Can you talk a little bit about what you've actually seen in the employment rate shifts that North Carolina has seen through even before and throughout COVID?
Sure, absolutely. So kind of let's go back all the way to the Great Recession. Unemployment rates were super high. I think they were 11-12%. Kind of at the point of the Great Recession. And then if you chart unemployment rates kind of moving forward all the way forward to February of 2020, just before shutdowns, COVID kind of really occurred, you would just see a downward slope. It was steadily decreasing the entire time to where, and everybody remembers just before COVID-19, early 20, super hot labor market. Not a lot of people out there. Unemployment rate was 3.7%. Again, historically low kind of numbers. If you look at the number of job seekers per job openings, information that's out there that you can actually find on the analytics at ncecommerce.com website, you can find the job seeker per job opening numbers. The labor market was super tight. It was, I think it was 1.3 job seekers per every job opening. So again, and that's an overall number. That's not necessarily matching skills with occupations, things like that. That's just an overall number. And then as soon as COVID hit, unemployment rate, as we all know, skyrocketed. It skyrocketed to 14.2%. Well, now let's fast forward to the most recent numbers. Again, these are all seasonally adjusted numbers. The seasonally adjusted numbers that were released just yesterday for the latest unemployment rate is 4.1%. So again, we were 3.7% prior to COVID. Numbers had gone down steadily since the Great Recession. We're currently at 4.1%. So we're at those historically low unemployment rate numbers. That's telling us that all the individuals out there that are currently in the labor force, which is defined as people who are actively seeking jobs or employed, the majority of them, a very low number, do not have jobs. Kind of that transactional kind of opportunities. Now let's look at the flip side of that, and that's a kind of a positive thing. Let's look at the labor force. Labor force was steadily growing from the Great Recession, kind of continuing to grow. So it was a little bit over 5 million, 5.02 million in February of 2020. COVID hit, it dropped down to 4.6 million at that point. We had a lot of people dropping out of labor force. Again, remember what the definition of labor force is. It's the individuals who are actively seeking jobs and the individuals who are employed. So individuals who are not currently seeking jobs, maybe they do want a job, but they're not actively seeking a job, disenfranchised, other things like that, or unable to hold a job due to other responsibilities at this point, dropped to 4.65 million. Go fast forward to our current numbers that we have, again, seasonally adjusted, and we're at just under 5 million. We're at 4.9 million in terms of labor force. So our labor force is still about 4% lower than it was. I'm sorry, 0.4%, about 0.5% lower than it was in February 2020. So we're seeing that people have not come back in the labor force yet. Some of that is the tightening, kind of why are they staying out? But here's the other piece that's going on. So let's look at the labor force participation rate. So this is the population divided by the people who are in the labor force currently. The labor force, which is a measure of how many people are active in the labor force right now in terms of the overall population. So February of 2020, the labor force participation rate was 61%. Then it plummeted down to in April of 2020 at the peak of the COVID recession to 56, almost 57%. Currently, we're not, we're still dropping down. Again, remember, we're only a 0.5 percentage point down in terms of labor force, but the participation rate is under 60%. So we're almost 2 percentage points lower in terms of that. So that's kind of what's going on with the labor force, and again, does a lot to explain the tight labor market we have right now. And if you look at the job seekers per job openings number, it's actually below 1. So that's saying that, again, on aggregate, not matching skills, not doing anything else, that there is less than 1 job seeker per job opening that is out there right now. So super, super tight labor market.
Yeah. So I know everybody on this call has heard from employers talking about the tight labor market and filling those jobs. And one of the things that at DW at Commerce that we've been able to do is work with employers on how they're looking for job seekers, because COVID certainly changed the way the unemployed have looked for jobs. And in some cases, how employers have already revised their traditional hiring and onboarding methods and policies. And I talked about that briefly back in December during our presentation on Workforce Then, but it's gotten even more attention. More trade organizations and employers are really looking to commerce and to the workforce and economic development professionals for strategies on how to do that. And so that's my favorite work that I'm doing right now. But I want to ask you how you think that this is going to change. Lawrence used the term economic scars of the pandemic, and it really is. How do you think that this is going to look in the near term and the long term for employers? Is there anything that's a permanent shift that you think that we all need to have top of mind going forward?
Well, in terms of permanent shifts, it's really too early to say. At that point, I would say that the way that we do get out of this is we've got, number one, talking about the participation rate. So again, we're down almost 2 full percentage points on the participation rate. We've got to get people back in the labor force. Why are people staying out of the labor force? Those are questions that we need to answer. And we need to, and Jenny, you guys are working with that all the time at DWS, trying to understand those challenges. One of the answers, again, I don't have any answer. I can tell you some of the information that's out there. For instance, Census Bureau does a household pulse survey. And one of the questions that they ask is, why are you not working currently? The number one is retirement. So we've seen more and more people retire. We had people that were, and if you look at the percentage of individuals 65 and older, and especially if you look at OEWS, I'm sorry, not OEWS, the State Employment Office, the data center, the numbers just came out for projections out to 2050. And if you actually look at those numbers and break it down by working age, defined as 18 to 64, 65 plus is, kind of retirement kind of folks, and then 0 to 17 kind of as a pipeline, you can see that we actually are projected to have out by 2050, more, the greater percentage of North Carolina's population is going to be 65 plus than it will be 0 to 17. So retirement is a big deal. Those baby boomers are continuing to get older. So that's part of it. The other piece is who were the other individuals that could be in the labor force in that 18 to 64 age bracket? Why are they staying out? Again, we hear the answers of could be transportation, it could be childcare issues, it could be fear to COVID, things like that. So those are the kind of questions that we've got to answer, and the answer varies for every community. So really kind of trying to understand in terms of a local community where those challenges lie and how we can get those folks in the labor force. But there's also another pool out there, the disenfranchised. It could be disenfranchised because of, just whatever reason, underserved, underutilized community that just didn't feel they could fit in the labor force. It could be, maybe it's a working parent, a parent who stayed home for childcare, that they couldn't get back in the labor force because they hadn't had experience in a while. Things like that. We need to get those folks back into it. Individuals with disabilities, individuals with criminal records, things like that. Those are the kind of populations that we need to figure out how to get them. And it's a match. It's encouraging the employers to make sure that they understand that those are legitimate populations, and also getting those populations prepared to work. So that's where I think a lot of this, in terms of where we have opportunities here in North Carolina for anywhere in the US. I think that's really kind of where we can make some significant differences.
You are speaking my language there about those untapped labor pools. I know people
Exactly.
are saying that, but how does automation play into this?
Automation is another challenge. Something else that we're seeing, of course, is that As employers don't have the ability to hire workers, they invest in automation. Automation had not moved as quickly as people had expected. You go back 20 years, robots are coming for all of our jobs. Nobody's going to have a job moving forward. And of course, there are manufacturing, for instance, if you look at our employment projections for manufacturing is actually projected to decrease in terms of employment from 2018 to 2028. Majority of that is due to automation, efficiency gains, things like that. And also understanding when preparing for jobs, what are the jobs that are really eligible that can be automated? There's routine jobs, and then there's cognitive jobs. And so when you're thinking about that, a routine job is something where somebody shows up and every day kind of does the same thing. Again, I think my favorite example of automation is, if you've seen it on LinkedIn and other things, Flippy the burger flipping robot, for instance. And I read that, I think it was White Castle, tried it out in one store and they saw efficiency gains. And so they bought it for many more stores. Well, how many jobs is that replacing across the store, across all of the White Castle stores? So just examples like that. And also to avoid the risk of your job being automated, it's getting in more into these cognitive type jobs that typically require a longer period of training, that typically require a longer, more education kind of to become effective in.
That's so interesting. I could talk about this forever, which is probably why they had me moderate it, not be on a panel. So I know that people have entered questions, and to make sure that we stay within our hour time limit, Nathan has some questions for Robert. What percentage of your annual organizational budget is dedicated to databases and workforce data?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as Jamie's talked about, there's a lot of great free data. And the interfaces and customizations are getting better and better. But these subscriptions are incredibly expensive, to the tune of, you could easily, we're about $1 million budget. We could easily put more than 10, 15% into them all if we pulled them down at once. I think it's also important to note that, a lot of these, we have to find secondary reasons to have them. That PayScale program is great for existing employers looking to recruit and know where they need to be competitive with other companies. The real-time data, the Pacer AI, that's got benefit for our transportation system and our TDA and CVB and our retail developers. So it has to be able to touch on multiple points. I'd encourage anybody out there too, don't get into a long-term product agreement with folks if you can help it, because every year it changes what's out there and what you need. The reason we went with who we did at the time, nobody else was as current, as flexible, and as customizable for the specific data sets we needed. We were competing on cost then. Today, we're competing more on availability and talent than we all are. So it's a little different. Would I take down that subscription today? It's a little different conversation, so be flexible out there.
Awesome, thank you. And then Nathan also had a second question. How did you get 7,800 survey responses? That response alone seems pretty remarkable in this day and time. I don't know how many people responded to the employer needs survey, but 7,800 is impressive.
We're a community of about 350,000 people. That's a great question. And I would caution people to say that when you go down this road, it is expensive. It is very time consuming. Facebook ads, radio interviews, getting in with the churches, coordinating a network of volunteers. And I'd say it's dangerous. We believed we had the labor for it. We were able to successfully demonstrate that because those 7,000, I think, came in about 2 weeks' time. We were able to get it, but it wasn't easy and it was expensive. And if we had come in short, if we'd come in at 1,000 or 1,500, we would have made the exact opposite case for our competitiveness. And I think all of us out here, being intellectually honest, it's kind of hard to go back later once you once you have that experience to pitch the same value proposition again when you have data that contradicts it. So if you're going to do it, I'd really recommend you think cautiously on it, and you're going to have to invest heavily. It's not something that we can do for every project. You'll also get fatigue in your community and amongst your partners. So it's a good question. We beat the bushes for around the clock for weeks.
Well, you did good.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box or the chat box.
If we could, I just, to Jamie's point there on the conversation around secondary sources of potential labor, I think that programs like what's being done with the North Carolina Manufacturing Institute, based Rowan, Cabarrus, Iredell, directly linking training in the community to employers that have a demonstrated need. I think those are really great programs to get people that either don't have the skills or been on the sidelines. And, you know, we've got, I'll get the number wrong, and Sheila Knight's on here, so I can't, the number of total military installations out there, but it literally means tens of thousands of members of our military transitioning out each year. We lose up to 2/3 of them to other places. That is an incredible place to recruit for any employer in North Carolina. You can have access to those people in advance. So that is talent retention for them and their spouses, in addition to what Jenni and Jamie, you were talking about, which I completely agree on, finding pathways of entry. For those that need jobs, some of them have been locked out. If we can't get them employed now, how will we ever? So.
And you know, that's a good point. So one of the things that has come up regarding the veterans is they're mostly, Sheila knows, because they're mostly on the eastern side of the state. But wait, is it where is Burke County? Burke County has a really good program. I think it's called Work in Burke, that focuses on veterans and recruiting veterans to their area to work. And so if you are interested in working with veterans or contacting or getting connected somehow, let me know, let Robert know, let Sheila know, any of us know. We can help get you connected. There is a staff of in my unit, there's a staff of veteran focused employer consultants that can help connect employers to veterans who are looking for jobs. Lots of opportunities there. Oh, Hickory for Vets, that's it. Thank you. I think Nathan put that up. So Josh, I will hand it back to you. I know this conversation could go on forever, and if anybody has other questions, you can certainly send them through to Liz.
Thank you, Jenni. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I know our participants found that discussion helpful. The complexity of workforce issues can be daunting for economic developers, but we have the luxury of sweeping these problems under the rug. We just can't do that, unfortunately. So help is available, and it comes in the form of seasoned pros like Ryan, Jamie, Robert, and Jenni. So we're grateful to you for showing us the way that your organizations are working to improve things for everybody. Thanks again to all our annual sponsors, the supporters we showed you earlier on the screen. Without their support, we could not do these webinars, so thank you. And most of all, thanks to each of you for joining us today. Watch your email for an upcoming in-person and virtual professional development events. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.